Welcome to First Garden, New Gardener. I'm Holly Baird.
And I'm Joey Baird. And today we're going to talk about some of the information that will be valuable to you before you actually walk in your garden and begin planting. We're just going to cover a small number of these important information just so you can be more successful. Obviously, you don't need to know this, but by knowing this, it will greatly enhance your success while you're in the garden.
Right, so I think a good one for us to talk about is cool weather crops versus warm weather crops.
And this is something, let's just go over a few cool weather crops. Radishes, kale, kohlrabi, broccoli, cauliflower,
lettuce, spinach.
are some cool weather crops. And there's many others. We're just briefly giving you these terms so you can do some of your research so you know when you hear them and you'll know when to properly plant or use these terms in your garden.
Right. So that's a good
Well,
start
what are some warm weather crops here, just so we can cover all the bases?
Tomatoes, peppers, sweet potatoes, okra.
Any kind of squash.
Any kind of squash. Okra, as I had said. Beans.
Yeah. So that's just some of the cool weather versus hot weather, and there's appropriate times. Cool weather's planted in the early spring, late fall, and the hot stuff's planted, obviously, in the summer.
All right, and so to go kind of along with that is shade plants versus, like, partial shade plants versus full sun plants.
Obviously, partial shade, 4 to 6 hours, full sun, all day long. Right. Pretty simple. But know what plants you're planting and know what sunlight they're requiring so you don't put a partial shade plant in full sun and bake it, or you put a full sun plant in partial shade.
What are some shade plants?
Some shade plants, leafy greens. You can do carrots, you can do potatoes, you can do green beans. As we spoke about in previous episodes, they will produce, but not as heavy as they would in full sun. So there's some that can cross both ways. Okay. And obviously, what are
tomatoes are full sun, peppers, squash.
Now, tomatoes will grow in partial shade 6 hours, but they won't produce nearly as good as if they're in full sun. So just know the different terms is kind of what we're going after here, so you can be more educated about the terminology when it comes to understanding how better your garden will operate.
Okay, so let's talk about corn, planting corn. A lot of people plant corn and they plant it incorrectly. And the reason why is because instead of planting corn in a straight row, you want to plant it in a group. And why is that, Joey?
Because it's air pollinated. The tassels, the top portion of that corn, actually drops down and pollinates the ears of corn. And by grouping it in, let's say, a 4x4 block or 4 rows at 5 foot long with a foot between, as the wind blows, it will pollinate that whole grouping. If you plant it in a single row 20 foot long, your pollination rate is going to be very, very poor. So you want to put it in a block if you do plant corn in the backyard. And based on who you ask whether you should plant corn in the backyard, some people say backyard corn is a complete waste of time because you work all that time for 80 days to get 1 ear of corn and it takes up a lot of space. Other people say go ahead and do it. It's very successful and it's worthwhile.
Right. It's up to you. Whatever you feel comfortable with. We've tried it year after year. Some years are better, some years are worse. It's just kind of, some of it's just gardening in Wisconsin.
And we're going to try a different technique with our raised berms this year with the corn. But know what that means and know that at least you'll have a better success rate if you plant it in a block. Okay,
so companion planting. So plants have friends. Some plants are friends with other plants and they help deter pests. They also help just grow better together. So a good example is tomato and basil. If you grow tomatoes with basil, that's a good grouping. Another example of non-friend plants, which could be kind of harmful, is tomato and marigold. And that's because marigolds attract spider mites, and you don't want spider mites on your tomato plants.
So based on what chart you will look at whenever you search companion planting, some may be contradicting to others, but do know, we don't companion plant. We do a little bit, but we don't focus solely on that. And we've talked to other gardeners who exclusively do companion planting and find it very successful. So it's something that you may want to look into when it comes to planning out and planting your garden. What's another thing that we need to know about?
Well, we're going to talk about the term of the week, which is Three Sisters Planting, or Three Sisters Gardening. Now, traditionally, this was done back in the day with the Native Americans, where they grew corn, they grew pole beans, and then they grew squash. And squash was ground cover, it grew on the ground. The pole beans grew up the corn, and the corn was the pole, or was the trellis, or whatever you want to call it. I've seen people do variations on that, such as like Jerusalem artichokes with beans and squash. Something that's going to grow up that can support a bean plant is what you want ideally. And then you can have something that's going to trellis it. You can even do like flowers to trellis it, whatever. But yeah, so Three Sisters planting traditionally was corn, pole beans or string beans, whatever you call them, and squash.
And that would be winter squash because it vines on the ground.
And if you're limited in space, it's a good idea to do that as well because you grow 3 plants in one area.
Right. So what are the things here? Let's talk about when you go in your garden, no matter how precise and how much you work at it, you're going to have weeds.
Yeah, weeds are a pain, and there's a few different things you can do. Sometimes you can, if you have the time, go out for a half an hour every day, pull some weeds, maybe only take 15 minutes. You could do that. You could also smother them out with mulching. Some people do that as well. Or you can do like a raised berm like we're going to do.
Yeah, or you can grid your garden off so it's very easily maintainable rather than have, let's say, 1,400 square feet of it's just garden. You can have small portions that are gridded off like we have with the raised berms, a 4 by 20 foot section or a 4 by 10 foot section, whatever it may be, so the task is much easier.
So let's talk about good garden tools. Now, as a new gardener, you might see a garden tool and you're like, $20 for what? And you're not sure why.
When the next one to them is $3.50.
Now, I have broken so many trowels. And, you buy the El Cheapo trowel, it's 99 cents or whatever on sale, $2, whatever. And, you start digging, all of a sudden you snap your trowel. Especially if you hit like a root or something, you don't know what's going to happen. So I invested in a really good trowel, and now, it's made a difference. And I think it only cost me $8 compared to like $2. So that was.
But how many trowels would you have broke for $2 to make up to that $8 investment?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's something that you want to look at because taking that investment, money does buy quality. That's all there is to it, and it really is worth taking that extra few dollars and having that tool for 20 years or 10 years or however long versus some of these El Cheapo tools, and we've come with our experience, last about half of a season, and you're going back and you're buying another El Cheapo tool to try to get through the rest of the season. So keep that in mind.
Right. So then we're going to talk about, finally here, is fertilizer and also what you're growing your plants in. And so fertilizer is you want to go with organic. Now, whether it be something that is homeopathic, maybe you use like corn meal on your tomato plants, you use Epsom salt in your garden, or you do your own compost, or you put banana peels in your dirt, or orange peels, or even eggshells or whatever. But if you want to buy fertilizer, so you're having an issue and you want to buy some bone meal, or you want to buy any sort of type of fertilizer, what you want to do is you want to buy something that's OMRI listed, OMRI, which is the organic approval of fertilizers.
Or an organic-based fertilizer.
Or an organic-based fertilizer.
Another thing we want to cover is know where the money you're spending at the garden center or online is going and who it's supporting.
Yeah, we highly recommend smaller garden businesses, your local garden center. But however, if you're in your local garden center, you may see the organic Miracle Grow or the organic, whatever. But something like Miracle Grow, that's owned by Monsanto.
Well, the Scotts Company, which is the parent company to Monsanto, which is the leading GMO biotech company in the world that's funding all this GMO stuff that we've spoke about earlier.
Same thing with Roundup, that's the same situation. So you want to think about, okay, even though it says organic, what's the parent company here? If it's something that's smaller, another good one I think is Espoma, which is, they're not owned by Monsanto, but if it's like we said, Miracle Grow, Roundup, Scotts, any of those owned by Monsanto. So if you're trying to grow your own food organically, trying to avoid pesticides, trying to avoid Monsanto, why spend your money on something like that that's just going to put your money back into Monsanto?
And Monsanto has got a great marketing plan. They'll buy out a lot of the small businesses, leave the label the same, but in the very back in the small print it'll say manufactured by Monsanto or Scotts Miracle Grow or whatever it is. So be aware, regardless of what you're buying in the gardening world, be aware of where that dollar that you're spending is going. Is it supporting something positive or something negative?
Right. So there's a few great tips for you. If you have any questions, we of course leave our email address in the show notes.
And you can go to our website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com, and hit that big button that says question, and we will get an answer to you. So, yeah, again, these are just some of the many different things that will help you when you go in the garden.
I'm Holly Baird.
And I'm Joy Baird.
And this has been First Garden, New Gardener. For more information, please visit thewIsconsinVegetableGardener.com.